Welcome to all the students of class 10, parents, teachers and others. You are now in the social science class. We have a student with us now. Can you introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Rahul. I'm from Modern International School, New Delhi.
Thank you, Rahul. Among all the social sciences, economics is an important subject. It is also treated as queen of the social science. This subject is introduced in class 6 in some simple rudimentary forms. In class 9th and 10th, all the important economic events, concepts and processes which the children, you all see in your daily life. Rahul, can we just recall what we have learned in the previous session? So, I am going to ask you some questions.
Okay.
And let us see how we have discussed, whether our discussion went on very well or not.
Okay, sir.
You know that the economic activities are classified in 3 ways.
Yes.
One of the important classification is that primary sector.
Yes, sir.
So, can you give an example of a primary sector?
Agriculture, fishing and all.
Very good. There is another sector called, like for example, tertiary sector.
Yes.
It is also known as service sector.
Service.
So, can you give 1 or 2 examples of service sector activity?
Trade, communication, banking.
Okay. Can you see anybody who is here working here who belongs
The studio people.
So, all the studio employees of NCRT is also part of the service sector.
Yes.
So, give an example of secondary sector.
People working in industries.
Okay. That's very good, Rakul. So, we also know that the classification is an important skill, essential component, essential analytical skill we are all learning when we go to school, particularly in the secondary stage. Okay. So, we also have to see the commodities, how the, I also showed you how gross domestic product it is estimated, what are the commodities, at which stage they got included actually. So, I will give you one question. You tell me, give an example of a intermediate commodity, intermediate good.
Sugar, when it reaches the retailer, then it is an intermediate good, but when it reaches us, it is a final good.
Yeah, very good. So, the sugar which people are using in your house, we all know that you are using for making tea, coffee, all the sweet items. So, when it reaches the final consumers, it is called final good, intermediate, like final good. But in case if it is used by a bakery, a tea shop, a hotelier, it is a part of the intermediate good. So, 2 classifications that we have seen, that agriculture, industry and service sector. This is one way of classification. We also saw in the previous discussion that how GDP has changed over the years. Yes. Okay. Which sector is highly contributing to India now in terms of output?
Primary sector.
Sorry, it is the service sector.
Okay.
So, today if you look at the, among all the 3 sectors, it is the service sector which contributes maximum. Almost 60% of the total GDP is coming from the service sector. Okay. The second major contributor is secondary sector.
Okay.
So, nearly about 20%, 25% is coming from the secondary sector. Okay. Agriculture constitute about 1/6 of the total GDP. Okay. So, now we have to see that this is not the only way to classify. There are other ways of also things can be classified. Let me give you an example. Look at the slide. You are seeing in the screen. People are doing different activities. People work in agriculture fields. Okay. So, many people working as agricultural laborers, and in India most of the agricultural laborers are women actually. Okay. And they do not get a regular salary. Whenever the farmer calls, then they are coming and working actually.
Yeah.
Okay. And there are people like me and many people here who gets regular income, monthly income. Okay. So, today we are going to discuss how these people can be classified. What are the ways? Is it only the economic activities that form the major classification, or are there other way of classifying it? For that purpose, economists, other scholars, they classify people's employment, the nature of employment, broadly into 2. Okay. See, the one example, one nature is that people who are not getting regular jobs, who are paid very low wages, who are not getting, for example, pension, gratuity, or who are paid very like irregular employment opportunities, who are getting very irregular employment opportunities, they are named as unorganized sector workers. In many other countries, they are also called informal sector workers. And then there are people who gets a regular income, they get monthly paid, and they also get a pension. They also get, if they are becoming sick, they are also going to their government or any employer, they also take care of the health expenses actually. Okay. On those categories of workers, look at the screen. This is the kind of employment that you are seeing here. These kind of workers, they are called organized sector employees. Okay. Why they are called organized sector employees? There are quite a good number of reasons actually. Okay. Please note that this category, the organized unorganized sector category, is not part of the any official classification. It is the economists and scholars, they classify these activities into organized and unorganized sector. In India, almost 93%, or for that matter 95%, and this proportion is also increasing day by day, year by year, they work in the, they are categorized as unorganized sector workers. And there are some small section of people who work in large enterprises, who works with the government organizations, who works in large factories. They are called organized sector workers. Okay. So how this has happened? Why this has happened actually? In many other countries, if you look at US, European countries, Australia, or some other countries like South Africa, you will find a major share of workers are in organized sector. Whereas in many developing countries like India, China, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, in those countries, a large number of workers are in the unorganized sector workers.
Yes.
Why this happens? Because one reason that the nature of employment, the number of labor laws that are practiced in India, they are very, very strict. Okay. For example, if somebody, if a person is working in a factory, the labor laws says that he should be provided with the social security provisions. For example, he should be provided with the gratuity, he should be provided with the pension if he is working for 15 years or more.
Okay.
He should be paid if there is a, if he is not well, he should be given medical expenses, he should be bear. You will find in many cities in India, there is one thing called ESI, Employees State Insurance Corporation is there. That corporation is running dispensaries all over India. Okay. So the many workers, factory workers, they go, when they become sick, they go to those dispensaries, get treated. Okay. That is why, like these kind of workers, they are called organized sector employees. Okay. But people like construction workers, agriculture laborers, domestic maids, that's a huge number of categories. Rack pickers, okay, and many other small employers. Okay. For example, the roadside vendors, they are all treated as unorganized sector workers. It is not only that it is the salaried people who are part of the organized and unorganized sector. There are people called engineers, doctors, many other professionals. They may not be working with the government, they may be doing independently on their own. But since they get a good amount of income on a regular basis, and their incomes are beyond the very relatively better income, they are also included as part of the organized sector. Okay. Okay. So this is the way the nature of employment forms the major criteria to categorize workers into organized and unorganized sector. Okay. Okay. Now tell me, if somebody is working in a private school, okay, a school teacher, okay, is she an organized sector worker or unorganized sector worker?
Organized sector.
Organized sector. Why?
Because she must be giving her salary on time,
so
and
very good.
Gratuity.
So a school teacher working in a private school, maybe like that school may be a very large school, maybe 20-30 people may be working, and that school may be providing provident fund facilities. Okay. So many such workers in private schools, private companies, they are also considered as organized sector workers. Okay. Then let us go to the other category. Okay. That the we can also classify activity on the basis of who owns it, who owns the company. Okay. For example, this organization, the NCERT, which is developing this program, it is owned by the government. Yeah. Okay. Since it is owned by the government, people call all these enterprises as public sector enterprise. Okay. All the banks that you are seeing, particularly owned by the government, yeah, they are also part of the public sector.
Yes.
Okay. So then there are people, for example, you may be seeing the small vendors on the roadsides, grocery shops, and people are selling sweets. Okay. All the shops that you are seeing outside outside this office or outside the studio, and people may be selling on the mobile vehicles. Okay, they are all considered as the private sector. Okay, so the ownership is also important criteria to classify a company, an economic activity. Okay, so this is not the only ways actually. There are some companies which are owned by the both government as well as private.
Okay.
Let me give you one example. The Delhi Metro Rail Corporation, DMRC.
Okay.
Okay. This company is example of a joint sector company.
Okay.
Okay. That is because the Delhi government and the central government and also the many companies like Reliance, they put the money and they set up this company and they run it actually. Okay. And whoever is having the maximum share will have the decision making authority. You will learn more about how this decision making is taking place. But for the moment you understand that when the government and the private individuals, they come together and set up a company, run it, that is called joint sector company.
Okay.
Okay. So the ownership of enterprises also is one classification used to categorize economic activities. In India, majority of the enterprises are under private sector.
Okay.
Okay. Only a small number of companies owned by the government. Okay. And some time back, about 30 years before, 20 years before, there were good number of enterprises owned by the both government and private. I'll give you an example. Some 30 years before, nearby Delhi in Gurugram, one company was established, Maruti. Maruti was a car company which started producing small cars. Okay, it was a joint sector company because at that time, Government of India and a Japanese company, they set up this company. Okay, and today this has become a private company. Okay, similarly in the last 40 years there were many joint sector companies established. Now they are all not there, and now most of these companies are now sold by the government to the private sector. So now the number of companies under the joint sector is declining, not so much actually. Okay, all those people who work in government enterprises, they are also called public sector employees.
Okay.
Okay. If somebody is working in a bank in State Bank of India, is he a private sector employee or public sector employee?
Public sector employee.
Public sector employee. Okay. If somebody is working in a HDFC bank?
HDFC bank, private sector.
Very good. So many banks these days are also run by the private sector.
Yeah.
Okay. So the banks and many other non-bank finance companies and Delhi Transport Corporation, is it a public sector or
public sector?
Public sector. Okay. Can you give an example of a private sector company that you come across in your daily life?
Tata Iron and Steel Industry is a private sector industry.
I already told you that workers in the organized sector constitute very small share, about 5 to 7% of the total workforce in India. You know how many workers are in this country? Almost like 500 million. That means about 50 crore people. So the 50 crore people are engaged in various economic activities. Some of them are self-employed, some of them are hired workers. That means they are working for others. Okay, and many of them are self-employed actually. Okay, in India, a good number of people are engaged in self-employment. For example, farmers is one category of self-employment.
Yeah.
Okay, running your own enterprises is called self-employment.
Okay.
Okay, so am I a self-employed or hired worker?
No, you are a hired.
I am a hired worker. Okay, so my employment rate is also, this is one way to classify employment nature, hired worker or self-employed. Okay, you will know more about this category, this kind of employment category in higher classes. So that's why I am not discussing much now. So who is responsible for protecting the workers, particularly in the unorganized sector? In many democratic countries, it is the government which takes the responsibility. Okay, so the government enacted many laws to protect the interest of the unorganized sector workers. Why? Because since the industrial revolution, many factories got closed.
Yeah.
Okay, and many factories got emerged actually. They employed child laborers, and they even now also you can find in some areas factory owners employ people and make them work for 12 hours, 13 hours, 15 hours.
Yeah.
Okay, it is also common to see that many in many factories which are highly hazardous, where accidents are more happening, people may tend to get injured,
Yeah.
met with accidents. For example, one study shows that in every year, almost like 1.5 lakh people die of the industrial accidents alone. 1.5 lakh people. Okay, so you also know that in many companies, many people are not paid properly or regularly. Okay, so given this precarious nature of the employment, the government, the Indian democratic government has taken up lot of steps actually. So it enacted many laws to protect the condition of the workers employed in unorganized sector.
Okay.
So one such law is that Minimum Wages Act.
Okay.
So this act was enacted in 1948, and it says that the government, in consultation with the trade unions means, you know what is trade union?
No, can you explain?
Okay, trade union means if there are 7-8 workers, they come together, form an association and registered with the government, that is called trade union. Okay, so trade unions constitute major section of associations in India to protect the interest of the workers. So what happened actually, the trade unions and the government and the employers, all the three of them come together on a table, negotiate and fix wages. Okay. And after the fixation of wages, then the government declare that these are the wages need to be paid for the workers, whether they are in organized sector or unorganized sector, whether they are working in private sector or in public sector or in joint sector. So the people, the employer has to pay that minimum wage. Okay, that is called Minimum Wages Act. And there is another act also, it's called Gratuity Act. You know that in any enterprise there are employers and there are employees. The Gratuity Act says that if an employee working in a company for a specific period of time, he should be or she should be paid a lump sum amount on the basis of the number of years he or she works in that company. You will find that people work for 20 years, 30 years. When they retire or when they leave the company, as per the Gratuity Act, based on the number of years of service, that employee is paid a lump sum amount. And then there is another activity called labor law called Equal Remuneration Act. What does that mean actually? In India, male and female are doing same job, but the females are paid less wages than the males. They may be doing the same job. I showed you the photograph where the women are working actually. Okay, a similar activity is also done by the males, but they are not paid equally. Okay, so in order to address this discrimination in wages, this law, Equal Remuneration Act, is been passed.
Okay.
And there are other laws also. For example, Factories Act. The Factories Act says that if you are a company, if you are employing 100 workers or more, and you should not close down a company without the permission of the government. Okay. Why? Because all the 100 people who become jobless, okay, they will suffer very badly actually. Okay. So the Factories Act is formulated to protect the interest of the employees who are very highly precarious. Okay. So I told you that these are the ways, different ways the government protect the interest of the unorganized sector workers. Okay. So now tell me I am asking you some questions actually. If you look at the screen, employees working in NCERT is a organized sector worker, true or false?
True.
Agricultural laborers are organized sector workers?
No, false.
False, good. When two private companies join together and form enterprise, it is called joint sector.
True.
A company employs 25 workers on a regular basis. It is a organized sector enterprise.
True.
Teacher working in a large private school is a organized sector worker.
True.
In this session, we introduce you to two ways of classifying economic activities. One is that based on the nature of employment, we discussed about organized, unorganized sector. We also discussed another important category based on the ownership of enterprise. Who owns the enterprise? It was very clear that based on the ownership, you can classify an enterprise as private enterprise, public enterprise, and joint enterprise. We also discussed about the nature of these enterprises, what do they do. So, this is the end of this session, and with this we are completing the chapter of class 10 economics, sectors of the Indian economy. Thank you.